All right, if you're not sure what this building is, it's the Georgia State Capitol. We are a couple blocks away. We're at the corner of Jesse Hill Drive and MLK. And I'm going to pan over. These two tall buildings are the Georgia State Station. Been over there a couple of times. And then behind Amy is the Butler Deck. And then kind of going down the street past the bridge is the intersection of Jesse Hill and Decatur, which is where the Fulton County Tower Jail and facility buildings were in the 1930s. I think it was actually built in the late 1890s, if I remember that correctly.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, we're at a kind of a busy corner again. But
I'm wondering if we should step down here.
we can go down, maybe go down a little bit in the lull. It might be a little bit quieter.
I'll step close to the camera, but not close to Krista.
Well, don't worry, I can stretch back a little bit, but we are a gathering of less than 10.
Yes, we are. Okay. The building might help. Well,
Yeah.
Some of the noise. All right, but I'm gonna talk loud. So yeah, so where we are, this block, this building behind me, the parking deck behind me, it was the site of this. Okay, this is called the Tower, or for obvious reasons, but it's also the Fulton County Jail. It was the Fulton County Jail from the late 1800s until I think it was knocked down in 1962.
Somewhere around there, yeah.
It was abandoned for a while, and then it was knocked down in 62. This seems like more modern architecture
Yeah,
than
for
62,
sure.
so I'm not quite sure what was.
Well, also you've got this interchange for the interstate and getting off the interstate. So yeah, a lot of changes in this area.
And
there's the MARTA train.
I'm gonna talk really loud. So, okay, so the reason we came here is because this is where Leo was kept during the trial until he was convicted.
And I believe Jim Connolly was here at
Jim
one point
Connolly
too.
Was here. It was an icon of the Atlanta city skyline. It was kind of, everybody knew the tower, and there are multiple stories throughout history of Atlanta and Marietta and Cobb County and all the surrounding counties. A lot of them, especially the big, more murder trials, a lot of the people incarcerated would come to the tower to protect them because there was this
The security level.
The security level was higher, and at this time, this is 19-teens, lynching in Georgia was at its peak. It was that was kind of the mob mentality was something that was prevalent. You'd find that in multiple stories, and so
They didn't even need social media for it. I mean, today we think social media stirs everything, but the pot was stirred back then too, even without that technology.
Right. I grabbed this book from my desk because there are a lot of connections between this and the Leo Frank trial, and one in particular deals with the tower. But Blood at the Root by Patrick Phillips, an excellent read. It details the terrible racial cleansing of Forsyth County. And there's again so many details that I won't do it justice, but in a nutshell, around 1913, 2 African American teenage boys were lynched in a mob situation, and both the defense and the lawyers. Prosecution, thank you. The prosecution lawyers were actually, a lot of them were the very same men of power who ended up 2 years later kidnapping and lynching Leo Frank.
Right.
And so there's a whole lot of cross ties between this story, and then after this lynching in Forsyth County, what happened is eventually the people of the county ended up running off every single African American person in that county, and it became this place of no man's land for them, where if they crossed the county line, they were almost assured to be either brutally beaten or murdered. And so it was a very dark secret again in Georgia history, and it ended. There was Hosea Williams did some marches up there. Oprah did one of her shows there and became national news. And this was in the 80s. It was racially quote cleansed until the 80s, really, and even 90s. And there are many, many people who still refuse to set foot in Forsyth County because it was just such a terrible place to go. So,
And there's a lot of African American families in Cobb County who have ties to that racial cleansing in Forsyth.
yes, so there were hundreds, if not thousands, of African Americans in Forsyth County beforehand, and when they were pushed out, many of them came and settled in farms and houses in Marietta. So this is an excellent book that kind of is a cross-tie side story. If you're interested in the Leah Frank story, you'll see a lot of the same familiar places and faces. And so, again, they had brought the 2 teenage boys who eventually ended up being lynched to the tower, along with a couple more, to the tower to protect them from the mob.
Right.
So again, with Leah Frank, they brought him. He stayed in the tower, and there is a description of it in And the Dead Shall Rise. So that's not the right page. The headquarters of the Atlanta Police Department dominated a section of Decatur Street lined by pawn shops whose Russian Jewish proprietors lived upstairs or in the rear, wagon yards crowded with mule carts and swarming with raw-boned old boys just in from the hills, Chinese laundries, tin-type studios, Irish near-beer saloons, Greek pastry shops, Italian delicatessens, boasting such delectable fare that they were frequented each season by the Mets visiting stars, and most ubiquitously, another big word, fish markets and grills that catered solely to Negroes and lent the byway its piscatory Congomen, Mullet Avenue. In 1913, this thoroughfare, if not as legendary as Peachtree Street, was much more vibrant, the throbbing aorta that pulsed the blood of every race, class, and creed into the burgeoning capital of the New South. As a writer for the Journal magazine, the Atlanta Journal, described it, Decatur Street is a kaleidoscope of light, noise, and bustle from dawn to dawn. No hour is too early for the fish and hot dogs to be sold, or for a dusky thief to pawn a watch or dispose of a little blind tiger. Oh, we learned about blind tigers. We'll have to post that lecture up on our YouTube channel. We have blind tigers in Marietta. Which was illegal whiskey. No time too late for a black mammy to buy a red cotton dress or a Jew to auction off 10 pairs of number 12 shoes. Here, bearded mountaineers brush shoulders with laborers fresh from the old country. The Yankee spieler cries his wares, and the Confederate veteran buys them. And through it all, Negroes, yellow, black, and brown, thread their laughing, shiftless ways, types of the South, which could be seen in no other city in the land in all their native picturesqueness. Decatur Street is the melting pot of Dixie. So that's a
which is down the road, kind of where that orange sign is. That's the Decatur Street intersection here. So
the Station House building, an immense Victorian Gothic affair erected in 1893, consisted of 2 3-story red brick wings radiating from a 7-story central tower that emerged from an arched marble portal and bulked upward towards an observation deck surrounded by columns and guarded by gargoyles. For a department that was at once righteous yet rascally, moralizing yet draconian, there could have been no more fitting home. So, quite a mouthful of description.
that was a lot of words. But
it was quite a building.
Yeah, so that building, and then later, not even like 20 years later, the tower would be the, I'm going to put it in quotes, sanctuary for George Goomis. If you're not, I'll switch to me. If you're not familiar with that story, George Goomis is Cobb County's most decorated World War I veteran. And in the mid-1930s, I would, without a shadow of a doubt, suffered from PTSD and shot and killed Doyle Butler in the streets of Marietta. And that mob mentality came in, and the jail in Marietta behind the courthouse was not going to be sufficient enough security, so they brought George Goomis down here. He was actually a Greek immigrant, made his way to South Georgia and then up to the Marietta area later, but the tower really became the place for needed high-level security if there was going to be a lot of people wanting to come after, lynching, mob mentality, all of that. So we are actually done here in Atlanta. We are not going to go to Milledgeville. Just an
Come
FYI.
on! I want a big road trip with a hotel room, but we can't do that right now.
If I was going to go to Milledgeville, I'd want to see our buds, but they're not there either working. So we are going to make our way back up to Marietta, and we'll see you guys up at the next stop. So see you in just a little bit.